Good evening. I'm Peter Skellinger with Lennar Multifamily. I'm joined here tonight by my colleague from Weingarten Realty. We want to thank you for having us, and thanks for joining us tonight. We've had a great opportunity to meet several of you in the audience, as well as some other community members and neighborhood groups and associations. We've received some great feedback early on in this process, and from those comments, we've been able to, I think, incorporate a lot of those solutions into the presentation tonight, what you're going to see with the development proposal. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Steve Johnson, who is going to be leading the presentation for Fuller Sears. We have Steve Sears here as well as Bill Fuller, so we have the design team here and prepared to make any, to respond to any comments. And both Weingarten and Lennar will be here as well. So after the meeting, if you want to pull us aside, we'd enjoy what you could offer up for us as we move through the process. And a reminder that we're still very early on in the design stage. So thanks again.
I'll pass to Bill.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. My name is Bill Fuller. I'm the principal at Fuller Sears, and I'll be joining the presentation by Steve Johnson, my partner, and the design lead on this. As Peter mentioned, we're very excited to be here tonight to show you what our thoughts are early on, get your input and guidance on how to move forward with the project. 4755 Fauntleroy, which is a true retail-based mixed-use project. In order to fully explain this in the 20 minutes we're allotted, we've adjusted the order a little bit of the images, and you'll find in the corner here it shows what the page is here and what it was, so you don't get too confused. But we're determined to get through this in 20 minutes to get it all done. In the 22 slides we're going to present with you, we're going to focus on the site vicinity and the neighborhood context. We'll provide an overview of our development objectives, touch on the recently adopted triangle guidelines, and launch into our 4 alternatives. We'll finish up with some vignette sketches of our preferred alternatives and streetscape example images from some actual built projects. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
And yes, I want to reiterate thanks to the board and thanks to all the community members for showing up tonight. And if anybody cares, the Huskies are tied 3-3. We'll keep you updated. So we'll start with a macro scale. I'm sure all of you probably already know this, but the site is at the crossroads of Alaska Street and Fauntleroy. And across the street is the hole right now, as it's known in this neighborhood. A little closer up, this is north to the right. I don't know if you can see this north to the right. This is before this hole was excavated. You can see this. The site is basically 3/4 of the block, not including the Masons Hall and adjacent parking. And you can also start to see the T configuration of the existing alleys. These are some montages of the various views looking out from the site across the streets. You can see it's predominantly very commercial-oriented as it surrounded the old Hewling Brothers. This is to the east across Fauntleroy, predominantly parking with a couple businesses. To the south across Edmund Street. Oops, sorry. To the east towards the Highland Medical Plaza and parking at Bank of America. As you can tell here, this is really an area that's in transition. It is nowhere close to even capitalizing on the allowable zoning, which is 85 feet in this area. So we acknowledge that this project is going to be the first out of the blocks, together with the project that's to the north, which is already been permitted, and this is an elevation across Alaska Street of that approved elevation, which is essentially 1 to 2 stories of retail and 4 to 5 stories of residential over the top, to a 65-foot height maximum. Our development objectives are to provide a grocery store, a drugstore, retail shops, and residential apartment building over the top. Now, this is a bit unlike some of the other recently permitted projects because basically those projects have been residential buildings that happen to have shops as required to base. This very important key part of our project will be the drugstore and the grocery store with residential over the top. So it's a true mixed-use project. Our program goals are 370 units, 570 parking stalls. Now, I should add, 570 parking stalls is way more parking than is required by code, but we feel it is exactly what we need to support the development and have a lot of cars parked off-site. The total retail area we're looking for is 66,000, not the 105,000 that was listed. That was a typo, so that's sized down quite a bit. Of the grocery, drugstore, and shops. The zoning is NC3, 85 feet, which basically means that it will allow the size of a grocery store as the NC3, maximum height of 85 feet. We're proposing a 70-foot height, and I'll go through why we're proposing that. We feel that 85 feet is probably excessive for this area. 5.5 FAR is allowed. That'd be 5.5 times the size of the site in actual buildable area. Our goal is to provide 3.75, which is approximately 200,000 square feet less than what would be allowed on the site. Quick analysis of the urban design guidelines. We've sifted through all these requirements. We've gone through the local design guidelines for the junction, and this is kind of a synopsis of the urban design guidelines, and I'll go through this quickly, but essentially this is a zoom in on the actual diagrams of the code, and you can see in the orange color we've highlighted the site for each of these diagrams. The first diagram indicates a green street that's designated for 40th Avenue, which will have parallel parking on both sides and quite a bit of landscaping and a 29-foot sidewalk, which pushes the building, our building, back along the west edge. It also calls for a corner park scenario at the northwest corner of the site. It calls for additional setbacks, upper level and street level setbacks along Alaska Street. And it also suggests that there be 4 lanes of traffic, actual bike lane, parallel parking, and additional setbacks. So that is actually impacting. So on all 3 sides of this building, we're being pushed in to provide those right-of-way improvements. Another important thing that's been identified in here is a way of breaking up what we could call a super block. This block is almost 700 feet long by 250 feet wide. It certainly needs this, and this cross connector that it's suggesting would be for automobile and pedestrian use. It essentially breaks the site into 2 separate buildings, and we think that's great. Another important point is this has been identified as a key intersection because there's a sense of arrival to the neighborhood at this location. And granted, the corner of the building is going to be very important because it's the first thing you see when you're coming down Fauntleroy. It's an announcement. What you see right now is gas. And of course, that'll be going away. These are some views onto the site. Basically, the Hewling brothers and various parking areas. This is the Masonic Temple. It's in the southwest corner. Now, this is reoriented to the north to the right. This is Alaska Street, Fauntleroy, Edmonds, and 40th. You can see this is the Masonic Temple and site. This in yellow is the portion of the alley that we expect to remain, and in orange, this is the portion of the T alley that we're expecting to have vacated. So we'll be going in for an alley vacation over the Seattle Design Commission and SDOT, and I'm sure they're going to have a lot of say in what some of these amenity spaces are going to be to offset this. There's a 11-foot rise along Alaska and about a 4-foot rise along Fauntleroy. So this is essentially flat, and this has quite a steep rise. Our first alternative is basically playing out the scenario that if we kept the alleys the way they are, what could we build? So it bisects the lot into 3 different parcels, which are fairly constrictive. You can see the layout of the first floor that we have with this scenario is drugstore with loading behind off of the alley. We have shop spaces along Fauntleroy, which can be broken up into multiple shops, obviously. We've got the residential lobby and entrance. We have a parking ramp that goes down. As you can see, what ends up happening down below is that these are 3 separate parking garages, which is fairly problematic because the north lot, being as narrow as it is, what's left over north of the alley, is not that conducive to laying out parking. You basically get 1 row of parking, but it's hard to circulate down. So this scenario is fairly deficient in its parking because of that. This parking garage will cycle down underneath this building. You can see the residential over the top. This exceeds the maximum length considerably. It's been designated for the zone. I think it's 275 feet. This is upwards of 500 feet long. And it maintains this alley. One of the issues with that is there's no acknowledgement of a cross connector in this scenario, but it could be built. It's basically a 20-foot alley. It's existing, or would be, through the building here, which is not conducive to pedestrian crossing in any way. So, and we don't get a grocery store, which is imperative in this development. It does go to an 85-foot height limit, so it does provide the 5.5 FAR. So this is a maxed out site according to the FAR. Scheme number 2 provides a cross connector through the block. It parcels out the north end enough so that we can get a grocery store close to the size that we need. It vacates this T alley portion here, maintains the north-south alley to Edmonds. It provides drugstore, shops, retail lobby. The access to the parking garage is straight down via the alley and Edmonds, and then a circular access point for the garage off of the cross connector. This is just enough room to get single-loaded residential here, and then we've got a donut-shaped residential in the north half. With an 85-foot height limit, we get to 5.3 FAR, which is close to the maximum FAR. One of the issues with this, even though this all seems to functionally work, the trucks, because this site being relatively tight, the trucks have to push out on 40th Avenue before they can back in, and then they have to exit via 40th, which is not good because this is only a 2-lane with parallel parking, so it's not that compatible for truck access and exiting. Here you can see the cross connector. This is relatively tight. The building backed right up against the side of the Mason's Lodge would be the back of the building because it's not double loaded. So these are the corridor side of that building. That's not a good scenario as far as we're concerned. The donut shape, in order to maximize the FAR, does not provide much natural light into that rooftop plaza, which would be at the bottom of that hole, and the interior units don't get much natural light. Alternative 3 is a scenario where we relocate the alley, the T cross alley, to adjacent to the Mason's Lodge. That allows to the south of that for us to get our program requirements for the drug and its loading off the alley, as well as the lobby, the same circulation down into the parking garage. By maintaining the alley, though, what ends up happening is since we can't build under a city alley, it again breaks the project into 2 parking garages. It does work better as far as the truck loading. It does give a grocery store of approximately the right program size that we need for our operator. And it also provides quite a few shops along Fauntleroy that can be broken up. And the new ramp location that goes down from that location. So this truck ramp is accessed off of this alley. Again, a donut shape, 85 feet, 5.0 FAR versus a 5.5. And here you can see the trouble with this scheme is because this is an alley width, it doesn't have great outlook and it's not conducive to pedestrian access. We could probably get a pathway along one side and 2 lanes going across, but it's not the generous pedestrian concourse that we're looking for. Donut shape has its issues again with natural light.
You have about 5 minutes.
Alternative 4 is our preferred scheme. Basically, instead of the alley in this position, we provide a cross connector that goes from 51 feet down to 41 feet. The 41 feet is ample for 2 lanes of traffic, as well as generous walkways on both sides. As it gets to this side, then we're going to actually have room for trees and landscaping along the side of the Mason's Lodge. Again, lobby for residential, drugstore, the same configuration, the ramp down off of Edmonds, retail along the street on Fauntleroy, a larger grocery which meets our program, access down to another garage access here. What's important is that with the number of cars that we have, 570 cars on 2 levels, we need to disperse that, and we imagine that a lot of the traffic will be coming off this way as well as down there. And we don't want to bottleneck the auto circulation into one ramp with these uses. Here the loading access is entirely off of the cross corridor and the alley, so we don't put trucks out onto 40th Avenue. This C configuration is going to allow a lot of natural light into the roof plaza. And we are not looking in this scheme for a 5.0 FAR or 5.5. We're actually coming in at the 3.75. We're only doing 5 stories of residential up to 70 feet versus 85 feet. This scheme represents our program goals of a 3.75 FAR. Again, probably 200,000 square feet less than we could build. The reason this works is because we don't have to build this out completely to meet our pro forma, because the grocery helps in that way with its rental. Here you can see the generousness in the trees along the cross connector. This provides us an ideal grocery layout and size. But it is a major reduction in the residential area and unit count that we can live with. These are 4 schemes. We won't go through this. This does a fairly good recount of the comparisons. I'll just put this out for now. These are a couple vignettes of what we visualize to be the potential of this cross connector. These are accurately scaled. We've taken some liberties on trying to undulate the residential up above and depict what we see would be at the pedestrian level, looking from Fauntleroy across the connector and from 40th looking the opposite direction. One of the things we'd like to try to do is the blank wall along the Masons is to provide our own colonnade, canopies, green screens, fairly generous planting, trees. Here you can see entries and visibility into the residential lobby. So this could be a very generous and a very pleasant path through this. On the opposite side, you see the shops coming around the corner and so forth, and the commercial vertical circulation that goes down to the garage. We expect this to be a Warnerfin design. There'll be no curbs throughout this area. Would have specifically nice paving and bollards, and so the pedestrians are welcome to walk wherever they want, but it'll be identified that they can stay behind the bollards because of the auto traffic that can't go through here and access the parking areas. Here's a view of down 40th Avenue looking north towards Alaska. This is a 29-foot with landscaping, Green Street. This suggests the size of the space that we'd like to have at the northwest corner for the park space. It's not the design, but we'd like to get, and we will be getting, I'm sure, a lot of input from the Design Commission, SDOT, and yourselves of how you visualize this space to be used. This is that key view from down Fauntleroy at the northeast corner. What we're trying to do here is provide ample space that can be used in however we feel fit as a backdrop to this significant announcement of the corner. We're going to try to open the building up as much as we can into this and utilize it. Whether it becomes a public space or not, we're not sure. The grocer would prefer entrance along this frontage where the grade meets their floor plate, even though it drops 12 feet. They would like to provide a lot of pedestrian activity and spill out of tables at the opposite corner. There's a question as to whether they would really want to utilize a space like this because it's so busy at the crosshairs of the traffic. So it might be a more significant space. It's used, it's visualized from as an announcement space. We want to shoulder the project down at the corner and then have this amenity space at the top and the plazas, rooftop plaza spaces in the corner. This could be like a lantern effect, but it's a little premature to say what that is. But we certainly want it to be a significant piece of architecture that you see down Fauntleroy.
Steve, we're at the 20-minute mark. Can you just make some closing comments?
Okay. These are just some landscape suggestions. This is the project that the design team did, the Admiral Safeway, and with that, and possibility of landscape plazas, rooftop plazas, and green factor. Done.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move to the board question, the clarifying questions section of the agenda. Does anyone want to start?
Oh, questions?
Yeah, no, you were good.
What was the scoring that you got for the green factor?
30%?
It's pretty consistent with this level still.
Are you going to provide the, yeah, I see on this plan, I didn't see it on the site plan, the curb walls on the corners of Alaska and Edmonds?
Andy Rasmussen, a landscape architect, is here. Andy, do you want to field that question?
Yeah, we're currently exploring different options. You're talking about on Fauntleroy Street or?
GIs on Alaska and 40th.
Possibly. We're working out with the civil engineer what the street frontage is going to be along that edge. Currently, we're out near the existing curb line, and there's only 2 lanes of traffic, so that's something we're still studying.
And it seems like you're providing still parking on the side on Fauntleroy, right? So are we going to provide also the curb bulbs?
Yeah, the idea there is to have parking and a bike lane, and if possible, curb bulbs as well.
Okay.
And we're going to be going through that with SDOT. It's pretty premature to say for sure what's going to happen there.
Are you going to provide permeable pavers at the coastwall on the mid-block crossing?
We haven't explored that option yet. It's a possibility,
But actually, it's over our parking garage.
yeah, it's part of it's over the
Yeah.
structure.
No, but the alley that you're providing on the mid-block?
Yeah, that is over the parking garage.
Yeah, one of the good things
Yeah.
about this alley is we're exploring doing it as a private alley so that we can have flush curbs and bollards and things that may be more difficult to do through SDOT, so probably not in that case, at least not to meet the green line.
So the parking garage is underneath of that alley?
Exactly, it's
Oh,
contiguous
okay.
for the whole site.
Oh, okay. Can you tell me why did you didn't see the option of rotating the seat shape to face the east side, where the views are?
Well, it's interesting. You could see the park from what we can tell, but there's quite a rise in the terrain to the east of there, so there will be no distant views in that direction. Really, the only view that there is specifically is down Fauntleroy the way the grades are down Fauntleroy towards Elliott Bay and the city. So there's a huge rise in, we can't show it to you, and it's modeled in the 3D, but there is not that much view to the east.
Oh, I thought at that height, 80 feet.
70 feet.
Oh, 70, okay.
But also we wanted to get as much light into the south orientation also. And we thought it helped the cross connector not have a continuous building looming on that frontage too.
Another question I have is about any special features, like architectural features that would make unique this corner? Any special unique features, architectural features, or artwork, something that would make special this corner on Alaska and Fauntleroy?
Up here you're talking
Oh,
about?
you're talking about
Yeah.
Yeah.
in this area here?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we will be putting quite a bit of effort into the architectural expression of these units, and these are some of the nicest two-bedroom units looking towards the view. Again, we have amenity space planned for here, and then on both sides of the amenity space, or club room or whatever, what you will, we have roof plazas that will be looking towards the view. As far as in this area, it's kind of an open slate right now. I mean, we'd like to get some input. I'm sure that a lot of you probably have some vision of what you'd like to see there, or we can discover that together. We're not sure. We just wanted to make sure that we provided the square footage there. I mean, it's essentially a 20 by 40 foot area inside the property that is, could allow almost anything to happen there, whether it's freestanding art, an announcement of the junction area. And again, we'll capitalize as much as we can on windows facing onto that to give it, but backdrop is about all we've got going at the base right now too. And it could be architectural, it could be something attached to the building.
All right, Vlad, you have any questions?
I've got a couple questions. First is, what's the total number of square feet of public alley vacation that are included in this?
Have we even calculated that? I don't know.
Okay, so that's a very important number. That's a significant benefit to the project, so I think we need to quantify that. The other question I have on Alaska, I think you said there's an 11-foot grade differential, and you have the grocery store running the entire length of Alaska. So basically, it's one floor of difference from one end of the building to the other, and the pedestrian environment that's created in a situation like that is very difficult to resolve architecturally. And you have to, if you enter the building at grade, then the rest of it, you're looking down into the building, which is in the basement. So I'm just wondering what your ideas are for mitigating that.
Well, actually, the discussions we're having right now with the grocery, and this is very premature and very early, but we're setting the floor height of the grocer within a few feet here, and it's more of a drop at the top. But they are open to the idea of some stepping within the interior to keep a direct contact with, especially in this area, which we hope is going to be a lot of interior seating that can spill out into this corner plaza. So another benefit is some of the vertical circulation. This is very premature, but they're looking at maybe having escalators in the interior, which would allow us to open up a very large area of the footprint that then is right at sidewalk level. So in other words, if you're at sidewalk level, you could be looking into this large opening of the escalators and also doubling as providing natural light down into the parking garage. So in the placement of all the elements that are part of the interior of this, I think we can satisfy a great deal of a good pedestrian experience. But having said that, we threw in the potential departures, that we might need some relaxation of the letter of the code, the actual code, and try to meet the intent of making that a very pedestrian-friendly experience along Alaska.
Those are my two questions.
Larry?
Really, I only have kind of one question. I think I'm going to throw it to you guys to interpret it one way or another. How busy is this alleyway going to be? I mean, I count 5 different truck bays that are off of that alley, plus you're going to be emptying cars onto and off of Fauntleroy from a 507-car garage. Is there going to be, you know, it's lovely to think of it as being a winner, but I think it's going to be a very, very busy alley. What other options exist to try and alleviate some of the likely traffic pressures in the alleyway?
Well, one obvious would be to bring in curb cuts off of 40th. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to bring in curb cuts off of Alaska to Fauntleroy. We didn't judge that to be a great alternative to be, you know, running cars across that 29-foot Green Street. So we thought that the consolidation of all that circulation, internal, if you will, was better than throwing it out onto the sidewalks.
And the other alley that exists from the Masonic Hall all the way over to not Everett Street, Edmund Street. Is there, I mean, I saw there is one park entrance there. Is that going to be handling what you expect to be much of the traffic? Is there a way to try and get it to handle more of the traffic that would be going into and out of this garage?
Well, maybe I can answer that one, Steve. Part of the issue of having subterranean parking with a lot of cars is you want to have multiple choices. As people start to come out, they start to sense what's busy where. If we have that all in one specific ramp, which I think Scheme 2 had, we would have probably some serious issues like that. So it was intentionally dispersed to be in 2 locations.
And actually, I think we're achieving what you're looking for, and just as a matter of course, because the residential parking, this is P1, so this would be the commercial level parking. Below this is the residential parking, and it's directly accessible. You come down this ramp and you go right into that ramp and go down, and then you access half of the cars. So I would imagine, just based on that and not having to cycle around, that most likely most of the residential patrons will do exactly that, and which may be utilizing that ramp more than this. And maybe this ramp would be utilized more for the commercial parking. It's hard to say.
How busy do you see that alley becoming?
Well, we haven't got to the traffic study stage yet, and we obviously need to do traffic studies. So that is something we're investigating right now as far as the issues that you bring up. Good points there.
Is that it for you, Larry?
Yeah.
Catherine?
I have 2 questions, and both of them are related to the urban design framework for this site. And the first one's on the corner massing, and you've recognized that this is on that big gateway to the corner. Both at a close pedestrian scale as well as the view coming Fauntleroy. The urban design framework had stressed, as you noted, a really strong corner on it, and you had relaxed the upper level setback there to have a really strong corner, but then elsewhere required a setback at 45 feet
Right.
on Alaska.
Right.
And you seem to put the setbacks all at the corner. So, Street Notch and requested the major open space on the other corner. So I'm just wondering, this is the only option you have for the massing, the corner, how you feel the massing alone is addressing that gateway.
Well, in reality, the tallest element of the building basically will be this overheight amenity space with whatever element it has on the top. And what we were trying to do is create a by these undulations and these outside corners, create something that's very vertical in proportion there at that important point. And this being the tallest, it enhances the height of that by shouldering down next to it and giving it kind of this independence, if you will. I could visualize this, you know, if this was the 5th floor going all the way around and wrapping all the way corner, there'd be nothing special about that. I mean, it would look massive, but it certainly wouldn't look vertical, and it wouldn't be a punctuation point to the end of Fauntleroy. So we felt that this was, we're open to input, but we felt that these corners and this visual interest that you get from that and the verticality of this would be good. And also, as you get right to the intersection, I think more of what you'll see is right here, and that's where we would really like to get some feedback from yourselves and the design commission about how you see that being created versus just a building pushing itself out to the property lines.
The follow-up to that, though, is are you required to do a 10-foot setback about 45 feet on Alaska?
Yeah, and you can't see it there, but you're right. At this point, it doesn't show here, but at about that point is the 100-foot from Alaska, and so we need to be 10 feet back. We're already 5 or 6 feet back, and then what we'll do is at 45 we'll shoulder that back to make sure that we have a minimum of 10 foot from the property line.
So what's the width of the sidewalk? You widen this.
I'll get back to you in a sec.
Okay, while you're doing that, I'll ask my second question.
Okay.
And it's again from the urban design framework, and it talked about 40th having a residential quality, one of the recommendations. And I was fortunate to be part of the neighborhood advisory group. We talked even about having stoops on that street. And you have the retail, the grocery store wrapping around on the 3 sides. And so with a very little amount of residential there. So I guess it's combined with how the, follow up to Vlad's question of how the grocery store can have 3 sides of storefront, and how that's going to be handled to enliven that pedestrian space as opposed to
This may be a bad example, but you're probably familiar with Tribeca in Queen Anne area. It actually is a Safeway that you look down into. Now, that doesn't have a direct pedestrian connection, but, and we did the same thing at the north side of the Admiral Safeway, where we had generous landscaping, canopies, and it looked down over the wine section, but it had the visual interest of looking into the space. So we can certainly do, we can certainly do, we certainly can find the actual,
What image are you looking for?
I was going the wrong way. There. The back of house area for the grocery has been identified to be basically closest to the loading area here. The produce area is in this area, from what we know of it right now, and the wine, cheese, etc., delis, spaces, and all that are in this area here. So we'd expect that we can capitalize that with quite a bit of openings. Now, it is right now maybe 6 feet below here, so you would come in and go down a series of stairs. As you move your way down this way, the sidewalk drops off, so we could be maybe only 3 feet above at this level, above the sidewalk, somewhere in that vicinity. So I think there's going to be a good connection, and our goal will be to open that up as much as possible.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Go ahead.
Did you explore any options that have more residential frontage on 40th, and did it work for you?
We did. It was an important program point, though, that we were trying to maximize the amount of grocery store and associated shop space with that as much as we could. So it more or less pushed more of that residential upstairs. Now, the residential in this area, you can see it here, it is only about 10 feet above the sidewalk level. So there'll be a good connection there. It's not elevated 20 feet. because of the grades, the residential gets fairly close. But we just judged that it wasn't that great to have residential in that right on the sidewalk level.
The sidewalk's not gonna last the 16 feet.
No, I'm talking about 40th.
No, I know, but to answer your
Oh,
earlier
thank you.
question.
Sorry.
Oh, see.
Thank you.
We need to keep the answers, true so we can get through the meeting.
Yeah. Is that good, Catherine?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just gonna ask one question, just try to keep us on the agenda. Mostly because everyone else already asked my questions, but can you talk a little bit about the approach from the south on Fauntleroy? What is that southeast corner? What's the character of that? In some ways, it's not the gateway to Alaska Junction, but that's a pretty well traffic corridor. What are some of your thoughts on that corner and yeah, what's the approach there?
Apologies, we don't have any views from that angle, but the thought is that there be, you can't see it from this side, but there is a considerably large setback to, you can see it here, where it leaves the drugstore, and the residential facade will go all the way to the ground at that point, because there is the lobby spaces there, but we're also looking at bringing the residential down one additional level as a mezzanine type of space, so the residential is only about 12 feet above that corner, and that together with the setback of the building, and a very dramatic, what we hope is a very dramatic entrance, a two-story entrance, two-story lobby at that corner with lots of glass.
Okay.
Sorry I have to paint a picture, I can't show you.
Yeah, no
of it,
problem. And just to clarify, as shown, the first floor level on both the south portion and the north portion, the drugstore and the grocery store, those are same ceiling height?
Right.
Okay. Just curious.
Mhm.
Okay, that's it for me. So now we're going to turn to you, the public. We're going to have our period for questions. And I asked at the beginning how many people would like to speak. I'm going to ask again just because people might have changed their minds. There's a few new people. Okay, yeah, we got a few more. So I'm going to ask that you keep your comments to less than a minute. And I will politely ask you.
Less than a minute, you just said?
Yeah, to 1 minute maximum. So
I don't think so. Okay.
just so we can keep it for the 20 minutes time. If we're really stuck and need a little extra time, we can make that work. But just to be fair to everyone who wants to speak. And we'll start this side of the room and make our way to that side. But everyone should have a chance to speak. I think that 1 minute will make sure that. Okay, everyone starts off. Please state your name and perhaps your relationship to the project.
Okay, my name is Sharon Weeks, and I live in the Fairmount Community Association. We're directly east of the project, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I also thank the developer for approaching our neighborhood to seek out our input. Here are my questions. First, I'd like for the developer to state your preferred design of the four. Second of all, I would like for DPD to acknowledge that there was a typo in their retail space, which was quoted in the Daily Journal of Commerce today, and I think this article gave our neighborhood quite a bit of relief to some of the questions that were coming forward from that. Third, I'd like for the developer to acknowledge yet again that the setbacks on the upper stories to preserve our corridor of view are important, regardless of whether they're required on Fauntleroy and Alaska. My fourth comment is providing the parking easily accessible to the retail, I think is an excellent alternative. I understand that the C shape is a great looking alternative in my opinion, but then again, the first time I looked at Jefferson Square, it looked pretty good there too. It didn't work out that way. And I appreciate the fact that we do want an iconic corner there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's enormous, out of scale, not relating to our neighborhood. We are a neighborhood in transition that goes from an older town, Main Street kind of environment. We don't want to say this is old and this is new. We want it to be transparent that this is a whole contiguous neighborhood. And I think the alley vacation would requires some neighborhood amenities. That is, was brought up in our review process, et cetera, and that alley, if it is to be designed, should definitely be a two-way alley where pedestrians can go on either side. So it needs to be wide enough that it accommodates not only all of this traffic and all of the amenities that go on there, but also says to a resident that's coming or going from that building or coming from my neighborhood, trying to get to the junction, that it's safe to walk there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi there, my name is Deb Barker. I was on the design review board for 4 years and have been off for a bit. I have a background in land use planning, and I am the president of the Morgan Community Association where I live. I'm going to direct my comments to the board because I have some requests for you to focus on tonight. I realize you're not going to be getting into the parking, but 1.5 parking stalls per unit on a rapid ride line is absurd. Secondly, old page 4 of your book, the neighborhood context discussion truly lacks accuracy. It omits examples of very, very recent mixed-use projects that total quite a few units. Actually, there was a project that had a grocery store that had an entrance at grade, QFC. There were projects that the design review board, some of you may recall, had very long discussions about the entrance onto Fauntleroy and Alaska, Whole Foods, HOLE. The most glaring omission of the community landmark section within page 4 is the omission of the mural on the old Chevy building. You need to see page 6 on the top row where you see that mural. There needs to be a discussion about what happens with that. 3, I feel that the applicant misses several key references to the entranceway to West Seattle. Steve mentioned that it should create a sense of arrival to the neighborhood. I think that the code does a really good job of talking about more than a sense of arrival. It's much bigger, it's much grander. If you may recall the discussions that we had, that the board had with the applicants of the Whole Foods store and indeed the Capco Plaza. Those I think were, Capco was successful, and I have my fingers crossed whenever Whole Foods goes through. The massing studies would show true differences among themselves if they all reflected the FAR that the applicant's choice is, and the 200 fewer units that you're seeing in options 1, 2, and 3. My last comment is that there was a shared parking access done with a permitted California Alaska building. I don't know why I can't remember the name of that one. They are sharing, with the alley vacation, they're sharing access underneath the alley. All these comments are to encourage you to have a second early design review meeting to get the height and context accurate, to see massing studies that show the same project instead of 3 projects that are huge and 1 project that is the preferred. So focus on that. I think the entrance portal issue is a key enough issue that you need to have a second EDG to make sure that the applicant gets it. They are asking you to design it. Whether you want to do that or not, I think you need to do that in a second EDG. And the applicant review the planner notes from the Whole Foods entrance deliberations and review the locations and the setting beyond just looking at a Google map. There's a whole lot more out there for them to take reference from. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deb. And please fill out Deb's example and direct your comments to the board. So just as a matter of format. Anyone else on this side of the room that wanted to speak?
Could you go to page 24, please? On the screen?
Oh.
I agree with what Sharon and Deb said, so I'll just go to my little thing. I live in the Admiral District.
Oh, sorry.
I think it is past.
Yeah, it's going too fast.
architect group worked on our Admiral Safeway, and I really appreciate that this is an example here. This is 33, this one. Oh, wait a minute, that's,
This is this 24.
I'm sorry.
This was 33.
you changed
there's one
the
that says
numbers, I need
west
this page. It was up here before.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Was this up there a minute?
Oh, that's an example. Oh, that's the landscape example. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, all right.
That's the number I have. Okay, we'll get there. Used up my whole minute
That's
just
page
trying to
20,
find
new
it.
21, new 21.
Oh,
The new 21?
21.
it was up there before. So I know you have it.
Two more.
Okay.
All right.
This is a simple little thing, but the Admiral Safeway, we were promised a green wall. That's what it should look like. This is the Admiral Safeway. That metal mesh screen is what we still have over a year later. So I would like it if they promise green factor to really have green factor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jeffrey Tosh. I represent the Alpine Masonic Temple, also as a private individual in the area. First of all, if you could bring up the elevation, please. The elevation
Of the
sheet.
Masonic?
Yeah, the site elevation drawing.
Oh, the photograph?
No, the drawing, where it shows the elevations on the property.
Oh, okay.
The photographs of the property?
No, you mean the vertical elevation.
Yeah, this right here. First, I want you to note that there's actually a 10-foot depression in here that represents our parking and the main access to our building. And that's, I'll bring your attention that we've had sole use of that particular alleyway for 62 years. And that's the main access point to our building. And I don't feel that that's being adequately addressed in any of the drawings that are being shown. That's a considerable design issue with us as the Masonic Temple. The other thing I would bring up is the traffic impacts on an alleyway of that sort. As I know the traffic study hasn't been done, but does anyone have an idea of how many cars are going to access major retailers of that sort in an alleyway that is already the sole access to our building? I don't ask this just because of our building, but I ask it for just a practicality viewpoint. And also that a large retailer like that uses very large semi-trucks. And how is that going to be compatible with a public walkway? I'm not quite sure how that works. These are really my concerns. We don't have any issue with the residential aspect of this because we don't feel that there would be really that much of a significant traffic impact. But adding large retailers like that will have a significant impact on the traffic coming in and off Fauntleroy, in and off Edmund Street, and potentially on 40th, and would affect its conceptual use as a green belt pedestrian walkway and both pedestrian and residential friendly area. So these are our main concerns. We'd like to see the design have a better flow pattern, particularly to the traffic, and address our needs of our building. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not going to refer to any of the drawings, I'll just stand up. My name's Sarah McCagran, and I was involved with neighborhood plan for 5 years and also live kitty-cornered across from where the residential entrance is supposed to be in the, unsightly condo there. We did our best. I'd just like to say, initially, this is early stages. I like it. I mean, I'm not thrilled, but I like it. And this area is zoned commercial. We all know that there's going to be some commercial come in there. I mean, I like all the low buildings in West Seattle too. My mother lives in one of them. But I think in reality, I hope, I want the board to make it as nice as you can and work with the designers to make it look good. But I like I like the idea of trying to make it as pedestrian friendly as it can be. It needs to be reasonable for the people who are going to actually live in those apartments as well as work for the retail people, because otherwise they're not going to want the space. I wish everybody the best of luck, and I'll be at probably all of the meetings with great interest. But so far, I like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here in the middle?
I'm Martin Monk. I'm also with Alki Masonic Temple. A couple other items that my colleague I didn't point out. The north side of our building, which would be the cross connector alley. Again, just emphasizing there is a 10-foot grade between 40th and Alaska at that point, which would go up half the side of our building. I'm not sure how that fits with the design. The second I wanted to emphasize to the board is we are a public assembly hall. We focus on serving our community. And not to advertise, but you're more than welcome to have your next meeting at our place. You can see the grade for yourself. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Does anyone else on this side of the room not get a chance to speak that wanted to? Okay, great. Anyone here? Sir in the red.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Reed. I live about 2 blocks south of the site, and my kids go to the daycare that's just on the other side of Edmonds. So we walk past this site 3 times a day often. One thing I'd like the board and the designers to consider is that the east-west connections, while are prominent in the plans and the neighborhood development plan, are important, but the north-south connections are just as important. In our neighborhood, we walk up to the junction all the time, and the one thing we wanted since we moved in is a safe way to cross Alaska Street without having to go all the way up to 42nd. Right now, we have to go 3 ways around to get over to, and then a 4th way over to Trader Joe's, excuse me. The other point is that Edmonds is not a small neighborhood street either. It's an arterial coming over from the slope down to the water. So there is fairly significant traffic as it is if people fly down like a ski jump. So I'd like some pedestrian consideration to the crossings north, south, and east, west in this area. And I honestly agree with previous commenters that this is a commercial area. It's not necessarily a residential block. So I don't really have an objection to using 40th as an entrance and exit to alleviate some of the pressure on Fauntleroy and Edmonds as well. Distribute it on all 3 sides, and maybe it'll lessen the impact.
Okay, thank you. Someone else here, sort of north.
My name is Bill Godey, and this is my first venture into this. I live a couple of blocks near the side of California. And many neighbors, myself included, are concerned that we're going to turn it into another Ballard. I don't know if you're familiar with the architecture in Ballard, but it's pretty bland, aluminum and glass. And I want something to be proud, West Seattleites to be proud of. My question to the architects is, would you like this building in your neighborhood? Would you say, this is proud, I'm really proud of this work. This is something I can really stand next to. If you can say that, then I'm okay with it. Also, I like to have the street presence softened a bit, certainly with trees and so forth. I agree with the comment regarding it is an entryway to West Seattle, to the junction, and it doesn't have to be massive. I think it has to have a certain neighborhood feel, possibly wood, plantings, something of that nature. But I hope it's not just going to be another glass, aluminum structure, which is cold, which has no personality whatsoever. I'm looking at the elevation here, and I've seen this elevation 1,000 times. I'm sorry. No, nothing against you, gentlemen. My father was an architect. I'm somewhat familiar with buildings, and there is nothing distinctive about that. And that's something I would like to see, is something distinctive. I don't care about inside. You guys have that nailed, I'm sure. But on the outside, we're living with it 24 hours a day. We see it twice a day, coming and going. Are we going to get tired of it and say, oh boy, that is going to be, in 10 years, oh, it's out of style, it's out of date. These are things that I think we really have to think about.